All right, hello. Uh, have you ever found yourself saying yes when every part of you wants to say no? I feel like you probably have. Maybe somebody asked you for your time, a favor, asked you to take on maybe some more responsibility at work that you just don't have the capacity for because your plate is already completely full. Even though you know it would stretch you incredibly thin, even more so than you already have been, you agreed anyway. Then later, you felt frustrated, overwhelmed, and maybe even a little bit resentful towards the person, towards the task, towards whatever. If that sounds familiar, you're definitely not alone. When people talk about boundaries, they often make it sound simple to have these boundaries, right? Just say no, stand up for yourself, protect your peace. That's a big one that I've heard before. Is like just protect your peace. But if boundaries were that easy, most people wouldn't struggle with them. The truth is that people rarely struggle with boundaries because they don't know what a boundary is. They struggle because setting a boundary threatens something they value, whether that's approval, connection, belonging, being needed, or even being liked, because we all mostly want to be liked. So today I want to explore five of the most common reasons people struggle to maintain or even set healthy boundaries, because understanding the obstacle is often the first step towards overcoming. Before we get started, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe. And don't forget my book. It's still available on Amazon. It's called The End of Our Stay, and the link to the book will be in the description. So let's just get right into to reason number one. And by the way, these are not like a top five. It's just the most common reasons for people who have a hard time setting and maintaining healthy boundaries. So the first one, fear of disappointing others. You can probably easily guess that one, right? For many people, the thought of disappointing someone feels uh, more actually than the cost of overcommitting themselves. They ask for help, your time. They want you to take on something extra, and immediately your mind shifts from like, "What do I need?" to "What will they think of if I say no?" So you say yes, not because you have the capacity, not because you generally want to help them, but because you disappointing them feels uncomfortable. The problem is that the unnecessary yes becomes a withdrawal from your own energy account. Eventually, though, that energy account is going to run low, and that's when resentment starts to grow, for sure. Disappointing someone occasionally is not, or I'm sorry, disappointing someone is occasionally is not the same as failing them. Now, there's a difference between disappointing someone every once in a while and actually failing them. Not the same. Reason number two, fear of conflict. This is also one I'm sure you probably could have guessed because I'm learning that not a whole lot of people like conflict. In fact, very few uh, enjoy conflict or even feel in any way comfortable in a conflict or conflict situation. In fact, some people learned early in life that conflict was even dangerous. Disagreements at home may have become explosive when you were growing up or even now. Expressing a need might have led to some criticism and being told that you're less than you are because you are expressing a felt need. Maybe even keeping the peace became some sort of a survival strategy. But as adults, boundaries can feel threatening because boundaries often create friction. They do. The irony is that avoiding conflict doesn't mean that you will eliminate the conflict. It just delays it. Delayed conflict will often lead to resentment. The conversation you're avoiding today will often become the argument you're forced to have later on. So, this short term discomfort often prevents long term resentment. Reason number three, your identity is tied to being helpful. Interesting. We talked about identity before and how your identity can change over time. But if your identity is tied to being helpful, it can really lead to you having trouble establishing and maintaining effective boundaries. This one really affects leaders, parents, caregivers, coaches, high achievers. I think actually more than they realize that it does. You've built your identity around being dependable, the person they can count on, the problem solver, the helper, the strong one. And because of that, it feels even more uncomfortable to say no, or I just can't do that right now. Not because it's wrong, because it feels like you're betraying who you are inside or even who you want to be. But being helpful and having boundaries are not opposites. In fact, boundaries often allow you to continue helping others without burdening or burning yourself out. All right, number four, you believe your needs come last. And I've heard that a lot. Most people would never say my needs don't matter, but many live as though that's actually true. They tell themselves, I'll rest later, I'll deal with that later, I'll take care of myself when things settle down. The problem is that later hardly ever arrives. In fact, it rarely arrives. There'll always be another task, another obligation, another person needing something from you for sure. And eventually you wake up exhausted and wonder how you even got there. Healthy boundaries begin when you stop treating your own needs as optional. All right, reason number five. And this was a little bit kind of more difficult to wrap our heads around, I think. The reason number five is that you fear what that boundary that you set actually might reveal about yourself or even that relationship. And so this is sometimes like the deepest reason of all why we might want to avoid setting boundaries. Sometimes people do this, or they avoid boundaries because boundaries create clarity, where that clarity can be kind of scary. Because if you say no, what's that going to say about you? Will that person still like you? Will they respect you? Will they even still value the relationship? Will they become angry? Will things change? They might. Sometimes it feels safer to remain uncomfortable than to discover those answers. But healthy relationships can certainly survive healthy boundaries. In fact, if a relationship cannot tolerate a reasonable boundary, that really tells you something important as well. Sometimes clarity is uncomfortable. We understand that. But chronic uncertainty can be exhausting. So, here are some questions that I want you to think about when you're trying to figure out if you're having trouble setting boundaries. So, the first question, what boundary have I been avoiding because I fear disappointing someone? Right? Fair. And that might even be a specific boundary with a specific person, right? Not just boundaries in general, but if I'm having trouble setting boundaries with this particular person, you know, which boundary am I trying to establish? And have I been fearing establishing that boundary because I don't want to disappoint that person? Fair question. Another question is, where am I sacrificing my own needs to keep others comfortable, right? Where am I giving too much? Where am I overperforming and it makes it to where they can underperform? Another question is, what am I afraid might happen if I communicate that boundary clearly? Like, what's going to happen if I say, no, I don't want to do that thing, or no, I don't have time to accomplish that thing that you were asking me to accomplish? What's going to occur there? How would my relationship change if I believe my needs mattered too? Right? Would they actually change? And then finally, what resentment in my life might actually be pointing towards a missing boundary? So if you do have some resentment there, maybe it's because you didn't establish a boundary early, or maybe you tried to set one and you're just having a really hard time maintaining it. So, in closing, boundaries are not walls designed to keep people out. They're guidelines that help relationships function in very healthy ways. The goal isn't to become rigid, all right? The goal isn't to become unavailable. The goal is to create enough space that you can show up as your healthiest self. Because the people who struggle the most with boundaries are often the people who care the most about others. They simply need to remember that caring for themselves is not part of caring of others or caring for others. If you've been struggling with boundaries lately, I want you to remember this. Every boundary you avoid eventually becomes a resentment. And healthy boundaries create the possibility for healthy relationships. So this week, maybe look towards your relationships, looks towards where maybe you see a boundary that you have been having trouble with, and ask yourself some of those empowering questions and see if maybe they can help guide you in the right direction to setting and maintaining more healthy boundaries and avoiding these relationship resentments. Right? Remember always, a healthy boundary isn't just something you do to another person. It's something you do for the health of the relationship and for yourself. So don't forget to like and subscribe. By now, you should be seeing the email that you can get a hold of me to ask for coaching content or just ask a question of me. Again, I want to remind you that my book is for sale. It's called The End of Our Stay. The link to it will be in the description here. So you guys go out and have as good a day as you possibly can. All right.